Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Jennifer Donnellan, Director of the Media Relations Division here. This is really exciting. I cannot tell you, I've been chomping at the bit to tell the world about this. It's been in the works for more than 2 years, and we are on the verge of basically going live with this training program. It really has the potential for this department to serve as a national model for law enforcement agencies across the country. This is more than about talk. This is really doing, and it's really exciting. So without further ado, I want to bring Chief Hank Stawinski to the podium to let you in on the exciting news.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that very much. And good morning. I'd like to begin by giving a short synopsis of the background of this project, which really dates all the way back to 2012. Myself and then newly appointed Inspector General of the Prince George's County Police Department, Carlos Acosta, unfortunately, he was just appointed to the bench, and now he's Judge Acosta, so he couldn't be with us today, but it speaks to the work he's been doing here, and it was recognized. He and I approached the University of Maryland leadership in 2012, and that was in the person of Dr. Charles Welford. And what we said at that point was, we in the Prince George's County Police Department have data, we have experience, we are a progressive department, but you have methodologies, you have insights, and you have rigorous investigation methods that will benefit us, but you also need the data and experience that we have in order to advance your theory. And that was the beginning of a tremendous collaboration. The first thing we did, Dr. Welford did, was the audit of the Prince George's County Police Department's crime statistics. And we know that they've gotten dramatically better over the last several years, particularly since 2010. He was able to show us where we were doing that well, verify that the numbers were in fact correct, and give us guidance on how we could get better. That leads to this much fuller relationship with the Department of Sociology, and the chair is with us, Patricio Korsinowicz, and my dear friends, Dr. Marsh and Dr. Ray. And in 2016, we had begun, in the fall of 2015, to provide a conceptual framework to our new student officers in the academy about the concept of implicit bias and how that impacts decision making. I wasn't satisfied that with the resources of the University of Maryland, we couldn't do more. And so I asked Dr. Marsh, how do we do more? And I said, what I don't want is an overview from 10,000 feet of this concept. I want something that speaks to the relationship of this institution, the Prince George's County Police Department, with the community in Prince George's County, Maryland. And of course, the University of Maryland home campus is located where? Prince George's County. She immediately seized upon that opportunity. And that led us down a road where in 2017, 2016, thoughtful projects were initiated through Dr. Marsh and Dr. Ray. Research was done. Information was gathered from the men and women you see behind me and the more than 1,700 of us out there right now protecting this community. They took that information and they took community perspectives. Some of those that came from things that you're familiar with, like Chief on the Go, and our formal and informal outreach to the community. And that's where this program in 2018 that we're about to launch provides insightful training that balances, and that's the key to this, it balances the needs of our police officers equally with the needs of our community. My goal, every decision I make, is weighted against how do we preserve and enhance the public trust. But my long-term goal is to change the expectations of this community about the Prince George's County Police Department. And I'm just going to refer back to yesterday, our great partner, Angela Also Brooks, but Detective Savoy, relentless investigator, a very challenging case. The expectation is that we would close that case, and we met that expectation. But by raising expectations, we force ourselves to improve. We force ourselves to become more progressive and more effective and to get results for this community. That's why this matters. That's why I sought their help in advancing this institution. And I'm going to now take a moment and introduce to you Dr. Chris Marsh, who's going to speak about the program, about the genesis of it, and then we'll continue from there. So, Dr. Marsh?
Thank you, Chief Stawinski. As Stawinski said, he came to me and said, I've got an idea. I need some help with my idea. He gave me full latitude to do what I wanted to do. And I said, Chief, thank you so much for the opportunity. I told him in his office, thank you so much for the opportunity to entrust part of your legacy to me. Give me a couple of days. Let me talk to my colleague, Ray, and let's come up with a plan that actually works. And I'm excited that we are going to pull Prince George's County and the resources from the University of Maryland for in-service training for all 1,700 officers. The day in the life of what will happen starting March going through November, every Tuesday we will have 50 officers come to the University of Maryland College Park. There'll be 3 major components to the training. The training will go from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We'll have some standard lecture because it's important to know what kind of terms and definitions we talk about when we say implicit bias, when we say racism, when we say sexism. It's important that officers know those kind of terms. We also want to make sure that we have a very interactive program whereby the officers get to talk to other officers about some of the things that they're seeing in the classroom as well as what they're seeing in the street and how that can have real-world implications for them when they go back into the street. The most compelling and innovative part about the program is that we've teamed up with the Department of Computer Science, in particular the Institute for Advanced Computer Studies. And what we've done is we've built virtual reality scenarios. So we're going to place all of our officers in virtual reality scenarios so that we can give them a real-world feel of a scenario, but in a safe environment. What we're trying to make sure that we do, according to what Chief was saying, we really believe that we're not trying to pick on the one who isn't doing well, but look at all the ones that are doing well and see how we can train better for the future for other officers to think about how they have biases and to move past those biases so we can move towards a bias-free policing. The other innovative aspect of the virtual reality scenario is that we're also able to collect physiological data. Being able to collect physiological data allows us to tell the officer when that their heart rate might go up, when their pulse might be elevated, and then what we can do is we can then give that information back to the training academy, and they can build additional models and train the officers to make sure that we can work through those points where they have elevated heart rates or their pulse goes up, and also all along the way making sure that they follow through and think through about these biases that they actually have. Now, we often use implicit bias. We've been using it, we hear it in the news all the time, but we really don't necessarily know what that means. So I'm going to have my collaborator and my colleague Ray come up as a social psychologist and really just tell us what implicit bias means. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Ray.
All right, thank you, Dr. Marsh. I first just want to say that the collaboration between University of Maryland and Prince George's County Police Department, the leadership by the chief, by Dr. Chris Marsh, we also have some of our research team members here, social scientists and computer scientists. What we've been able to do is actually take implicit bias and measure it. Implicit bias is simply the association that we make between two seemingly unrelated things. Everyone has implicit biases. We have implicit biases about everything from which store might have the best fruit to who might be the best basketball or soccer player, and we do this every second of every single day. We make mental shortcuts. What we're able to do with the research that we've been able to collect is we can actually get inside people's minds. We can actually get beneath the skin and actually say, what are better ways that we can take that information, give it to police departments and police officers so that they can better police and figure out what's going on the streets. Part of this is being able to examine factors such as how much sleep people have, how far an officer might be from the station to where their home is. All of these factors matter in terms of being able to examine what leads to higher levels of heart rate, stress levels, these sort of things. So implicit bias isn't solely about race or racism. Instead, it's about any sort of ism, any form of difference. And part of what we're able to do is not just look at what's happening in people's minds as we look at computer-based tests, but we can also take our virtual reality simulations where we've went out into the community. We've taken faculty, staff, students, alumni. We've taken community members. We have collected a whole bunch of information, and over the past 2.5 years, we've developed a program that we want to start right here, that we're developing right here, and that we know that can end up being scalable to actually make a difference in people's lives. The last thing, and I want to echo what Dr. Marsh said, part of what happens is that when an incident occurs, we frequently see something bad happening. And oftentimes an officer is ruled as being a bad apple. What we're able to do is to take the information we have and say, what is missing from this information? Well, what's missing are positive officers, the positive things that they're doing every single day that go unnoticed. We can actually bottle that information. We can examine that. We can say, who are the officers where we don't necessarily see an increase in heart rate, where we don't see their stress levels rise, where we don't see them have the same level of biases as other officers. What is it about these particular officers that make them different? And then we can use those particular officers to provide recommendations to better train police departments. And that is one of the really big innovative things that we're doing now. So I think I'll turn it over to our chair, Dr. Patricio Kazinowicz.
Thank you. I hope that what comes through in these presentations is the extraordinary collaborative character of this relationship that the university has been developing with the police department. And I would like to thank Chief Stawinski and County Executive Rashan Baker for their support of this effort. The project, I think, addresses some of the most fundamental missions of the university, which is to produce new knowledge, to come up with new technologies, and then figure out how we can use those new technologies to improve the health of our communities and the safety of our communities. And I think that in pursuing those goals, Professors Rashan Ray and Chris Marsh have offered extraordinary leadership. They're stars in our department, and they're engaging in path-breaking research on issue that is of great concern to all of our communities. So this has the full support of our university, our college, the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences, the university as a whole are very strongly behind this research. I should mention also that next week this collaborative effort will be featured in Congress at a special Research on the Hill event, and we're just extremely grateful to the police department for the opportunity to engage in this exciting relationship.
Thank you, Patricio, as well as Rashan and Chris. And I just want to take this moment to put in context. Again, this is intended to serve equally the interests of the men and women standing behind me whom I love, who work so hard to keep this community safe, to put them in a position to succeed and be effective, and to meet the community's expectations, heightened expectations of the professionalism of this institution that I'm so proud of. All of that happens because of a lot of different dynamics. The most important is the leadership at the very top. And it's my privilege now to introduce you a county executive who empowered leadership throughout his tenure to make changes, to push forward, to do the sorts of things that needed to be done to deliver the institution as it exists today, which is good, on its way to being better. And so it's my privilege finally to introduce to you our County Executive, Rashan L. Baker III. Mr. Baker?
Thank you, Chief.
Absolutely.
Felicio, I want to thank you, Dr. Marsh, Dr. Ray, for your collaboration with us. Certainly, from the very beginning of the administration, what we made very clear, and the Chief has talked about it, is that the safety and well-being of the citizens of Prince George's County and the residents of Prince George's County is our paramount duty. But also with that safety comes the ability for them to have confidence in the men and women who interact with them from our public safety forces. So the men and women you see behind us and those who are out in the street, we know the training that they go through. What we want to make sure, especially coming in at the time that we did in 2010, was that the people in Prince George's County were confident that those individuals had the utmost training. And we had said from the very beginning that we were going to use every tool at our disposal. You've seen that with us with our Transforming Neighborhoods initiative, the innovations that the Chief has put in. And here's just another part of that. Teaming up with a well-respected, top-tier university, research university at the University of Maryland and Department of Sociology to do something that is in the news every day now. and has been in for a number of years, and that is the bias of individuals, and how do we make sure as people are patrolling that that doesn't happen, that they don't get stopped for no reason, that the interactions are positive. And the only way to do that is to face issues head on. And I want to commend Chief Stawinski for being willing to not only team up with the University of Maryland, but one of the things he said, and I want to make sure it's emphasized, we can't get to the information, the doctors can't get to the information unless we give it to them. Unless we're transparent and willing to turn that over. Unless the men and women behind us and the men and women out on the street trust the information enough that they're willing to put it out there so that we can make sure that they do their jobs better. And so I want to commend him and his staff for being willing to take that step. This just the other thing that as I travel around the state these days, the thing that strikes me about what we're talking about here this morning is we are being proactive. The Justice Department didn't come in, the FBI didn't come in, citizens didn't come in and say you need to do this. We said we want to do this to make us better, to make the men and women who patrol our streets better. That's an unusual step. Most people don't do that. But that's the department that you have here in Prince George's County and the leadership. I'm proud over these almost 8 years to be county executive in a department that has taken on issues head on, has made it very clear that we want to make sure that the men and women who serve us not only get the best training, but get the ability to come back home to their loved ones. And so with that, I commend you, Chief. I commend the University of Maryland, and this is a great program for Prince George's County.
Mr. Baker, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
Okay, folks, just to sort of touch upon some things that the county executive just said and the chief and everyone from University of Maryland, there was no single incident that precipitated the launch of this program. This was a program that was the brainchild of these folks behind me, and this started more than 2 years ago. And that took the research that they had to do with the Prince George's County community. They developed a study directly, specifically to Prince George's County community and its residents. They gathered information from our officers, and they tailored this program together. The exciting part of this program is this 3D virtual reality that you heard them talk about. The officers will go through real-life scenarios that they deal with every single day. They'll be able to evaluate their responses, and basically we're going to be able to enhance what these officers are doing out in the streets every day. It's really exciting to take something that standard across the country. You have implicit bias training, textbook in an academy classroom, trainer, instructor, talking to officers. This, the chief said, what can we do? How can we make this better? How do we take it out of the classroom? They're taking it out of the classroom. 10-hour training sessions with all of our sworn members starts in March. Chief?
And I just wanted to take one opportunity, because I missed it in the initial part. Nobody's able to achieve these sorts of things independently, and a lot of kind things have been said, but you need to know, Assistant Chief of Police Hector Velez, my partner in the DOJ Memorandum of Agreement and consent decree going back a dozen years, fundamentals of this process. The Deputy Chief of Patrol, Chris Murtha, the Deputy Chiefs, Raphael Grant and George Nichols, and Deputy Chief Samir Patel is part of the Major City Chiefs Fellowship right now, so he couldn't be with us. And again, I want to thank again Judge Carlos Acosta. Those are the people who have taken this vision forward, subjected themselves to 3D training. I got seasick myself, but saw the value in what we were trying to do, and now are carrying that out across 1,700 people. It's a Herculean task, but I didn't want this moment to pass without introducing you to the people who are making it happen here, and then the people standing behind them making it happen for the community on the street. So I apologize for the interruption, but it was important that you know the people standing up here are the ones who are making this happen.
Do we have questions? Tracy?
So I was listening to you saying that this is about working with the community and dealing with biases in terms of how officers interact with the community and enhancing that. There is a Justice Department investigation into internal complaints with officers of color within the department. How is this training going to impact that ongoing investigation?
Well, as we stand here today, I still have not seen that complaint. We've been completely transparent. What I know is that this, going back to events preceding that development, was part of our vision for improving internally and externally. And as I said during my remarks earlier, every decision I make is about preserving the public trust. So I make tough decisions internally and I make tough decisions in the community. Those things have different perspectives, but I have provided every piece of information that our partners at the Department of Justice have asked for. I have provided it timely and without reservation, and I will continue to do that because we simply have no secrets in Prince George's County.
So is the hope that this will also help with internal?
Well, the hope before all of that arose was that this would continue to professionalize this institution. We've come from a trying past when it comes to crime in Prince George's County. Those days are behind us. I won't be here forever. So the people standing behind me at the 5 and 10 year mark in their career will one day rise to leadership. This is a tool that will put them in a position to continue to lead this institution forward, but they have to be successful and they have to be safe.
Let me just, because that's a really good question, Tracy. And I think what's so great about the program, it is not only will it help us as we deal with the public, but as the chief said, this is the training that the men and women throughout the department will get. And so it should help us both externally and internally. Because as Dr. Ray said, we all have bias. And the question is, how do we deal with it? And so in every decision-making position, whether we're on the streets patrolling, whether we're in a meeting, or whether we're actually making decisions about promotions and whatever, here, it will help us. And so this is something I think will make not only the police department better, but something that we should look at, and it'll probably be a recommendation throughout the government.
Yeah, I wish I could go through it. I think everybody should go through it. I think as a reporter, I think the reporters should go through it. I mean, I think we all have biases, whether we realize it or not, and we engage them, as Dr. Ray said, every single second of the day. And they've been shaped by how we grew up, who our friends were, what our family members said to us, what that one thing that happened at school, it all shapes those things. So we all have bias, and as the chief explained to me, he said, this isn't about condemning anyone. This is about making people aware. And if you're aware, then you're going to have a thoughtful response to something instead of a conditioned response to something. And that is a win-win for the department, a win-win for the community. It's a win-win for all of us. You had a question, Scott? I'll get you now.
You've heard a lot about data collection that's already occurred and data that will be collected over time. Could you be specific about what's been collected and what sort of findings we've had so far with the data that's been collected?
Well, I will begin the process just by saying that we've opened up our records to the university in a lot of different avenues. Again, they have tremendous capacity to apply methodology and get good results from that. For that specific question, though, I'm going to turn back to Dr. Marsh and allow her to give you her answer, because she's the professional, along with Dr. Ray, who've been applying it.
So like we've been saying the entire morning, is that we wanted to make sure that everybody understood that this is a university, Prince George's County, and resident project. So we went out and talked to the residents to see what kind of implicit bias training program would they like to see. We interviewed over 200 residents. We also talked to officers, and we rode along with officers. We went through the Citizens Police Academy, and I do have to pause and just say thank you to my command staff, because they have been so gracious and compassionate and considerate whenever I called for a request or asked about something. So Deputy Chief Murtha in particular and Deputy Chief Raphael Grant, I thank you both. I also wanted to thank the Training Academy, because they're not here. Major Terrence Shepard has been instrumental in making sure that this project happened, because we wanted to make sure it was as authentic as possible. We are academics and we understand that. So we spent time with the police department so that the officers go through this training and they know that we have understood as academics that we don't know everything. It's important to pull from officers, and we actually do have an officer that comes to all of our research meetings to talk about what is authentic and what's not authentic. And Dr. Ray will talk about some of the other data we plan to collect through the project.
And so as Dr. Marsh was saying, we've collected a lot of data over the past couple of years. Part of that is as researchers, we do our homework, we do our due diligence, and moving forward, what we're collecting is we have information from police officers that tell us a lot about what factors might increase or decrease how they might treat someone. Things that affect all of us, how much sleep we get, how long our commute is, how authority operates in a particular workspace, and then how a person might take that out on someone else. And then, of course, demographic factors, race, gender, age, how long a person has been in the police department, military experience, level of education. These are all factors that we can take and kind of bottle and put into a research portfolio. On the back end, what we do is we have a lot of behavioral outcomes that allow us to actually see how officers are performing when it comes to, say, a pullover incident or a suspicious person call. These are the types of things that officers encounter all the time. What we do as researchers, we're good with data. The thing that the police department has been open about is getting the right amount of data. I think when you have the right variables, when you have the right amount of data, you can actually determine, again, not just where we see officers performing badly, because that's not really what this is about. Instead, we have a program that actually allows us to see when are officers optimized? When are they performing the best? What are the factors that actually lead to those particular things? So when it comes to data, I mean, anyone can mention possibly any variable. In our research team at the University of Maryland, several who are sitting here on the third row, several who are back at the University of Maryland working on the project right now. We have over 30 people at the University of Maryland working on this. And pretty much anything a person could think about, we probably have, and we're going to actually evaluate.
I'm still confused about what you collected, though.
Oh, okay, so what we collected. So once again, we've interviewed over 200 police officers. We went out into the community, as Dr. Marsh said, and interviewed well over 100 citizens in the county. We have determined what factors might lead to people thinking that implicit bias increases or decreases. And then again, on the back end, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to be able to examine physiological outcomes. So part of this is so innovative what we're doing. Part of what people have to understand is that around the country, no one else is doing this. So we actually have to transform how we're thinking about what data means and realize that we're doing something different. So even being able to objectively look at stress, objectively being able to look at heart rate, these are data points. These are measures. No one has been able to do this before. We're going to actually be able to figure out what variables lead to officers being able to perform better in a scenario compared to individuals who have other sets of characteristics.
Okay, in back, and Lynn, did you have to get you right?
Bias from intuition. How do you know, also, how do they know whether it's an intuition as opposed to a bias?
Chris.
An intuition versus a bias. So again, when we talk about implicit bias is something that's unconscious. It's something that people are either unable or unwilling to admit. So when you say intuition, when I hear intuition, I hear it being measured as something that a person is consciously thinking. Now we've went from unconscious to conscious, right? So when you say intuition, this means a person has actually thought it. That's no longer unconscious.
But couldn't bias be the same thing?
So bias can be explicit or implicit, okay? This is good. We like definitions. This is part of what we do with officers when they come in. Define these terms. The other thing that's important here is if you look at the top word searches over the past few years, it's these terms we're talking about. Implicit bias, something that I failed to mention that Dr. Marsh told me to say before I came out here. Implicit bias is something that the first day of a social psychology class students learn. The term has been around since the 1950s. It's nothing new. It's something that's kind of just hit the media. So when we say implicit, that's also another way of saying unconscious. Again, that is what people are unable or unwilling to admit. When I hear conscious, or I hear explicit, or even intuition. Now when you have an intuition, that means you are actually thinking it. It's no longer unconscious. What we're able to measure through computer tests, as well as through our virtual reality simulations, it's not just explicit behavior, which we know a lot about. It's decreased over time. Racial discrimination has decreased over time. Racial bias has decreased. Sexism has decreased, even though we know it's very prominent still, but it's decreased over time. But the unconsciousness of it, what's implicit about it, is what we're able to uncover through the program that we've built.
But aren't implicit biases the result of some kind of programming on some level? In other words, if all criminals look like this, is it easy to think that that's the case? And is that implicit or is that an actual bias?
Is that implicit or is it an actual bias? And in both. So in other words, you're saying the same thing. In our world, those two things you just said actually are pretty synonymous in our world. So in other words, yes, of course a person can have explicit attitudes about someone, but a person can also have implicit attitudes about, say, what a criminal looks like. They can have implicit attitudes about what an officer looks like, about what they think an officer should be and what they are. And working with officers over the past 2 years, we know that officers are extremely diverse, and this department is really progressive in actually wanting to show the community how much they're actually working at doing some things that are different.
Okay, Chief, wait, one second. Chief wants to address that, then I gotta get to Lynn, and are you Rachel? And then Rachel, okay.
Just very briefly, explicit bias is something we deal with immediately and stand behind my record on that, both in terms of crime in the community and internally. And this is not about explicit bias, things that are obvious. This is about the nuanced things that can lead to bad outcomes if we're not aware of those lenses that we have. And this is where this is groundbreaking, because it's getting at something that you're not consciously aware of, but is impacting how you police and how the community views the institution. And I just wanted to add that piece.
Lynn?
Can someone talk more about what the training is like, what the scenarios are like?
Sure.
You know, how is this like different from the shoot, don't shoot?
Why don't you guys do it
How is
together?
it different than shoot, don't shoot? That's important. Okay.
So what we've done is we've developed over 90 scenarios, okay? So we're not talking about one or two or three. Our research team from the University of Maryland, as well as several police officers, went out into the community. Again, this is what Dr. Marsh was saying about surveying the community, interviewing individuals in the community, saying, what are the types of interactions that you might have with an officer that you've heard about, that you think was contentious, that you felt like went awry? And we took these scenarios, in particular, standard things that happen all the time, pull over, and then the types of scenarios that officers have all the time, which is someone is standing out and they look funny. They look suspicious. They have no idea who they're approaching. They didn't get any information. And officers are instantly put in a scene. What happens at that point is we have taken actors and actresses that we hired who were students, alumni, faculty, and staff, over 30 of them. And we went out over the course of about 3 to 4 months. And we filmed over 90 of these scenarios. When officers come to the University of Maryland, similar to, or I should say, different from shoot, don't shoot, how they get put into a particular scenario and they have to figure out how they interact, that is the way ours is set up. They're going to interact with someone in a virtual reality space. The difference is that rather than just having someone observe and say, you did this wrong or you did this right, instead we have these objective measures that allow us to say, this is how you're performing. When you interacted with this person, your heart rate jumped by 10. When you interacted with this person, it stayed the same. Let's have a conversation about that.
The other part that I want to mention is that besides just focusing on shoot, don't shoot, what we did, again, because we wanted to make sure that this was a university-wide program that's just housed in sociology, we talked to other departments and we talked to other disciplines and divisions of the university to ask, how might we make policing safer? The police safer, and how might we improve community police relations? So with that being said, we talked to people in speech and hearing, and they told us how hearing loss can often come off as non-compliance. So what we did is we built a scenario for someone who has a hearing loss, and so we want the officers to be able to understand the difference between someone who is non-compliant and someone who has a hearing loss. And then also, again, because this is a University of Maryland project, we're thinking about this collaborative institution of university and police officers teaming together. We also looked at the state mandates, and one of the state mandates is autism. So we wanted there to be a continuity of training across the different entities. So what they get at the training academy, they will also get at the University of Maryland. So we built a scenario for someone who is acting out in autistic behavior, and we want the officers to be able to understand and see and recognize the difference between someone who's autistic and someone who's non-compliant or is non-responsive. So we make sure the scenarios cut across many different dimensions. Because I just want to echo what everyone's already said. We are not bringing, I am not bringing my 1,700 officers to the University of Maryland to call them racist for 8 hours. That is not the plan. That is not the objective. That is not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to get them to understand is that everybody has biases. Everybody has biases, but when they go unchecked for an officer, it could be a matter of life and death. So we want to make sure that they check the biases.
And if I can
Yep.
just add to that very briefly, we are in a place now where we're seeing police shootings coming down in Prince George's County again last year. This ensures that that trend continues. And to your point, this is shoot, don't shoot as a decision-making exercise in a moment. This is about all those subtle interactions that occur that can either precipitate or prevent that shooting from occurring in the first place. So it's a much deeper and richer examination of an interaction. And again, the key is to put the police officers in a position to succeed and come home safe, and put the community in a position to have enhanced trust in their skills when they're interacting in sometimes very trying circumstances.
Thanks. Before I get to you, Rachel, I think it's interesting, and I'll get to you right after Rachel. How many, and this is just a question for yourself, how many, when you saw this was going to be implicit bias training with the police, immediately went to race? Because it's police. It's all these other things. It's autism, it's hearing loss. It's not just about race. So that just speaks to just current situations and current cultures. But I mean, goes so much beyond that. So just please keep that in mind. Rachel.
So will the training include an assessment at the end to measure its effectiveness? And if so, what will that entail?
Yes, so we're going to assess on multiple different, okay. I'm not that tall. We're going to assess on multiple different dimensions. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to have a lot of data points for the officers. And so we're going to have a debriefing at the end of the training with the officers at the end of every Tuesday. We're then going to allow the officers to log back into the website and give them a battery of information on all of the data that we collected. We're also going to get videos for them so we can talk through what their actual results mean and how they can move forward. The other thing that we're doing is across the campus, we're trying to get every discipline, every division to provide 10 things that can help the officer when they're in the community. But then also besides that, because we are researchers, we want to make sure that our program is effective, we do plan to go back into the community and interview the community and say, do you think that this training has started to make a difference? And we also want to go back to the officers and say, you've gone through this training. We don't know if we're going to do 6 months, 9 months, or a year, but we definitely want to go back and evaluate and say, you've gone through this training. How have things changed? What has changed? We are not saying that this is the silver bullet. But what we are saying is that this is a start, and this is a start of a long-term relationship with the police department. It's not just the training. It's going to go for, our relationship is going to span many, many years to come.
Tracy?
What will you all do with your research? Are you guys planning to publish this, and how much did this cost? Who's paying for it?
The research, that's Hank.
That's a chief question.
It's a perfect question, too, because we're in budget season.
Well, I mean, there's an old grind that says there's folks who understand the cost of everything but the value of nothing. In some, the department will invest about $150,000 over several years in what will change people's lives. At the end of the day, my hope is that the University of Maryland will publish and will put this information into the public discourse and will provide other institutions around this country with the ability to adopt these methods. It's just like Mr. Baker alluded to with TNI. You can take the model of TNI and you can apply that in any community. I firmly believe that this technology combined with this approach will be able to be tailored to communities across the country. It's not off the shelf, this is it and that's the solution. It allows those communities to structure a program that will meet the needs of their officers equally with their community. And yes, publishing groundbreaking work is the point. And this, in my opinion, is groundbreaking work that takes American policing to a new place. And I'm very proud of the fact that it all came right here out of Prince George's County.
And I'm going to call that a wrap. Can you take yours individually, or do you need to ask it right now? You sure? Are you sure, Scott? Go ahead. I'll give it to you.
I'll ask researchers, please. It sounds like you've done some hours of ride-alongs. Please tell me what the most surprising thing surprising impression, moment you saw, other things you can recall for being out there.
Okay, I was scared. That was the first thing. We were pulling over somebody, and my partner, I call him my partner, at the time said, well, if he starts shooting, get under the dashboard. By the time he got to dashboard, I was already under the dashboard and ready to go. But what I think I found what I found most interesting, the officer that I rode along with on my ride-alongs, and Chief Stawinski made sure I was in District 3 from 3 p.m. to 1 a.m. to make sure I really got a chance to see the essence of the streets. Oh my God. He lived in Prince George's County. He used to be a DC police officer, and he wanted to police in the neighborhood that he lived in. And one of our project manager, Genesis Fuentes, we have heated conversations all the time on whether or not an officer has more empathy if he lives in the neighborhood that he polices. So what I can honestly say is that because he lived in this neighborhood, I saw empathy. I only rode along with that partner, so I haven't got a chance to ride along with those that don't live in the neighborhood, but I do think that living in the neighborhood, living in Prince George's County, might be one thing we want to think about when we start thinking about hiring practices in the future. And speaking about hiring practices, because we do have the virtual reality scenarios, one thing we can think about, and I've talked to a couple of the majors about this as well, is whether or not we want to use some of the scenarios that we have and incorporate that into the hiring process. So this is not just a one and done. We hope that this project spans well beyond just the training and spans more than just this year, but for many years to come.
Okay, thanks, folks. If you have individual questions, you can come up. I appreciate it. We'll be sending out a press release to sort of, in case you have any questions as well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.